So, hello. Today I'm going to talk about this book, The Ritual by Adam Neville. Um, it was recommended to me on a channel that I'm subscribed to, and I felt that this was going to be right up my alley. It's supposed to be kind of like folk horror, horror in nature, and I love Algernon Blackwood. And I once saw a really nice quote saying, H.P. Lovecraft was trying to teach us the fear of the unknown, whereas Algernon Blackwood taught us the fear of the outdoors. And I think if you ever want to read a really horrific story set in nature, read The Willows. After that, you don't need to read anything else. This is the greatest of all time nature-based horror story. Another one by Algernon Blackwood that I really love, that I find so horrific that I could only read it once, is The Man Whom the Trees Loved. And now I'm finished talking about other authors, and I'm now going to talk about Adam Neville and his book, The Ritual. Too long, didn't watch. Don't buy this book. It's terribly boring. It is way too long. It clocks in at over 400 pages, most of which are basically just utter drivel. I'm sorry to say. This is, I was debating about putting this into the bin. I'm going to donate it. I'm not going to throw it out. I will not keep it because it's just, like a waste of space. What's the story? Well, the story is quite promising, actually. We've got 4 people. In the beginning, I would have called them friends, but it soon turns out that they're not friends. There's Luke, there's Hutch. The two of them are in pretty good physical shape. And then there's Dom and Phil, who've gone to seed. They're now fat. And the 4 of them have decided to go on a long hike in northern Sweden, close to the Arctic Circle, not too far away from Norway. So it's in that area. And the 2 fatties, as they call them, are dragging them down. One of them busted his knee on, I want to say, the second day. And another one, Phil, was wearing new shoes. And so his feet are full of blisters. And that I can actually sympathize with, because that's what happened to me when I was very young. I'd outgrown my shoes, but we hadn't bought new ones. And I went on a long hike and I couldn't walk in the end. They had to carry me. So I can really feel for this guy. So my sympathies were all out there. And then basically they decide to, and I was like, okay, Mr. Neville has definitely read J.R.R. Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Ring, because shortcuts make long delays. His 4 hobbits, and please remember, these are 4 people. It's like The Hobbit. It's like The Fellowship of the Ring when they go into the Old Forest. He basically decided, okay, I can do this better. So he basically takes the story of the 4 hobbits entering the Old Forest, and of course they get lost. And it's even the same thing when they kind of instead of walking through the belt of forest, which is virgin forest, so it's not been maintained at all. It's really difficult to get through. They actually walk parallel to it, so it's all a mess. But these guys have compasses. But again, it's the forest that keeps them inside. It prevents them from going where they want to go, because it turns them around, and then there's a ravine, and then there is this, and then there is that. So I was like, okay, well, yeah. So for the first 100 pages, if you've read the Old Forest part of the Fellowship of the Ring, you can skip the first 100 pages, because that's exactly what happens. Minus Tom Bombadil. And there's also no Oldman Willow. There's also no character progression in this book, so, maybe you shouldn't read it at all. Anyway, they come across a very high tree upon which the carcass of some, I don't know, animal, maybe a deer or something, has been flung, opened up, and its innards are spilling out, and it kind of it looks like it's been posed. So oh, who could do this? There are no people here. So maybe it's a bear that's using this as a pantry, blah, 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 whatever. So they keep going. And mind you, I do believe that this was a very terrible thing to behold for them. I mean, but then again, it's nature, But it started to remind me of a Call of Cthulhu adventure that I wrote myself and ran, where we deal with a Wendigo, because that's very much reminiscent of what Wendigos do to their prey. So I was like, okay, maybe this is a Wendigo story. And again, I was already reminded of Algernon Blackwood's The Wendigo, which is a really good story. But, you know, again, I was disappointed. So anyway, they keep going. And then it turns out that actually Luke is kind of jealous of the other two, because of the other three, because you know, they've kind of grown apart and he's the only one who hasn't made it. He works in a I don't know, he works in a record store somewhere in London. Everybody else has made it. Everybody else is married, has children, except for Hutch. He only recently got married, but they're all rich, kind of, blah, blah, blah. And he's kind of like, you know, and Hutch basically hangs out with the other two. And he's like, well, basically he should be hanging out with me. So there's this jealousy there. And it also turns out that he and Hutch would have gone on other hikes without the two anyway. So basically he feels alone. And you kind of go, oh yeah, poor fellow. I can feel how that would be terrible for you. So yeah, let's keep going. And then one by one, and I'm skipping, one by one, they all get picked off by a presence in the woods. It's large. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. They get to a place where they can sleep because they're obviously sleep deprived and the weather is terrible, blah, blah, blah. And they sleep in an old house where they find like kind of like a goat effigy kind of with long horns, and it's kind of like, you know, really eerie up there in the attic, and they all have nightmares and dreams and start sleepwalking. And you kind of go, ooh, this is potential, especially since it's called the ritual. What if they are part of a ritual? What if there's kind of like the, you know, like the Louisiana swamp Trump voter equivalent somewhere here in northern Sweden, who's basically, you know, like hunting them down and blah, blah, blah. No, nothing. There is no ritual. Nothing happens. They just get killed. But not before Luke realizes and opens up to everybody about his anger management issues. And he does that in a very drastic way by actually busting up Dom's face, breaking his nose, possibly fracturing his jawbone, or his cheekbone, I should say. And everybody's like, oh, whoa, dude, I mean, Dom has been quite sarcastic. And then Hutch takes him aside at one time in the evening and says, well, you know, Dom's marriage and Phil's marriage are both on the rocks. And the wives are divorcing, they're losing their children, their companies have gone bust, so cut them some slack. And he was like, well, why didn't you tell me beforehand? I mean, yeah, they didn't want to talk about it because they wanted this trip to get away from it all. Well, you know, newsflash, guys, you can't get away from it all. This baggage will always be with you, and it's informing how you are behaving. And the two of them have been really nasty to Luke as well. So, you know, okay, newsflash, guys, if there is something that's really bothering you and you're trying to get away from it all with other people, not on your own, but with other people, it makes sense to actually spill the beans and say, hey guys, I'm having a really bad time. I don't want to talk about it in detail, but I'm really trying to get away from it all, but my life is on the rocks. So that doesn't mean I can behave like a total idiot. But it does mean that people will be a little more forgiving, I would say. But also then it's out in the open, and sharing is caring. So, hey, guys. But of course, you know, they're being like, this is like a totally, I don't know. I mean, none of these people are interesting. None of these people show any character progression. None of these people you would care about. I remember watching the Blair Witch Project like in 2015 or something, so way after it had come out, because I found a copy online and I watched it and I was like, okay, so I don't know what the fuss is all about, but I was interested. I was intrigued. I wanted to see how it ended. After about 200 pages, everybody's being picked off. You know, they're basically at the end of the line. They have no food left. They have no water left. Then there's only Dom and Luke left, so they've kind of bonded over this, you know, where I'm like, yeah, that part I could get. And then they are attacked again, and Luke is smashed in the head. So he has head trauma. I'm talking serious head trauma, and that is actually quite well described. He describes the head trauma and how it affects Luke really well, where you kind of go, yeah, that's head trauma for you. And, then I couldn't suspend my disbelief anymore, because the things that he was able to do while suffering from head trauma, you simply can't, especially since your body's being already wasted. Your body is being wasted. It's eating itself up. I mean, seriously, because they have had no water, they've had no food. So there is no way he could pull this off. But Dom finally gets taken by the thing, and then he ends up being found by someone. And he finds himself somewhere in the middle of nowhere, in a bed, in a cabin. There are people, blah, blah, blah. And then he wakes up again, and there are people with animal heads. And he's like, okay, am I dreaming? And it turns out, I was like, okay, how much more of this? It turns out that this is some kind of Norwegian death metal band consisting of 2 boys and 1 girl, and we're really talking children here, like late teens. And they are basically part of a cult, or they are the cult that offers up sacrifices to this thing in the woods, which I'm like, hey guys, if I lived there and this thing was living in the same woods as me, I would make sacrifices to that thing as well, so that it leaves me alone, because the thing's real. Because as they're walking along, all of their friends have been picked off one by one, or all of the group, because they are not friends. Although at some point Luke professes we're best friends. I'm like, mate, that's your head trauma talking. But the thing is, they basically are torn apart, like, flayed like this, almost like this Viking eagle, and put up on the trees for them to see. So this thing's also scaring them. And, there are descriptions of it, and it looks so much like a Wendigo. But again, the problem is the Wendigo is a very specific mythical being situated in the northeastern seaboard of Canada, and also the United States, and it is deeply rooted in the Inuit and First Nations belief system there. So it's nothing to do with Sweden, and it has a very interesting also psychological background to it that makes it a really interesting story to tell, and also a really interesting mythical being. There's nothing of that in here, because that's just boring. Anyway, so it turns out that these 3 I don't even want to call them metalheads, because they're just plain stupid. And I think it's also kind of like ridiculous. They're death metal. They're a death metal band, and they call themselves Loki, Surtur, and Fenris. And you kind of go, oh yeah, I mean, seriously, Mr. Neville, what were you trying to do? Like, can you get any more cliche than that? Possibly, probably not. So, and they basically try to sacrifice him. So I skipped all of those, because I was like, I can't bear this anymore. When will it end? So I skipped forward several pages. I want to say a couple of dozen pages just to get to the end, because I really wanted to see what happens in the end. So somehow there's a truck involved, and he steals the truck, and he drives out of the forest, and this thing is following him, and then it smashes the truck, and then he basically takes his Swiss Army knife and he knifes it through the throat, as its head is basically right in front of him. The horns have pinned him to the seat of the truck, but it can't get any closer, because the horns are, like keeping it too far away from him. And this could have been a really tense situation. This could have been like in the hands of somebody who can actually write. This would have been a really interesting scene. The way he writes it, it's terribly bland. Then he basically rams the knife into this thing's throat. It runs away. He gets out. He keeps walking. He finds a track, and then he just keeps walking. Then he's kind of like, I don't care about the fact that I have like 25,000 pounds of debt with NatWest, because all that counts is that I'm alive. And I'm like, yeah, well, you're not going to be alive for very much longer, because you still have head trauma. There's still something terribly wrong with you. You are seriously at the arse end of nowhere. You have no idea where you are. You have barely any idea who you are. You are naked. You have no shoes. You're walking on a gravel road. And anybody who's ever done that, and I have, will tell you he's not going to get very far. And that's the end of the book. And you kind of go, okay, what did I just witness? Well, Bad writing, that's what. Because this could have been a good book. I mean, The Ritual. It would have made much more sense if these guys had been 4 real friends who would have gotten lost. And then The Ritual would have entailed somebody telling them, you have to sacrifice one of your own to get out. That would have been psychological horror where you could have brought in the entity, real or not. There could have been kind of like, it could have been down to the fact that they are suffering from malnutrition, that they are suffering from dehydration, that they are exposed to the elements, that they're exposed to this thick forest that is actually closing in. Is it? Are the trees moving? Is this Burnham Woods? Who knows? That could have been such a good book. But this book, you know, like I said, apparently it's now a major motion picture. I've never heard of it. I'm going to try and see if I can somehow download it off of the internet. I'm never going to pay for it and watch it. But like I said, I mean, apparently he's written many other books. The YouTuber who basically recommended this book said, you know, this is one of their, I'm going to read everything by this person. No, just no. So don't bother. Don't pay for this. If you can get it in your local library and if you really want to get bored, get it. Other than that, ignore it. Talk to you soon. Bye.